लक्ष्मीनाथसमारम्भां नादयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां வையகம்யன் பொய்கை பூதம் பேயாழ்வார் மழ்செயர்கோன் மகிழ்மாறன் மதுரகவி பொய்யில் புகழ் கோழியர்கோன் விட்டு சித்தன் பூங்கோதை தொண்டரடிப் பொடிபானாழ்வார் ஐயன் அருள்கலியன் எதிராசர் தம்மோடு இருவர் ஒருவர் அவர்தாம் செய்த துய்ய தமிழ் 24 பாட்டின் தொகை 4000 அடியோங்கள் வாழ்வே. So this session we are going to talk about, we'll start from where we left last session, and 5 stages or manifestations of Perumal, in which we saw Paravasudevan, Vyuha Vasudevan, Vibhava Avataram, Antaryami Perumal and Archarubam. Archarubam is where he is showing himself in various kovils, in various forms, Nindru, Irandu, Kidandu, in all manifestations he shows himself. Now, the Archarupa Darsanam that we get is through our eyes. So this session we are talking about Kannara Kandu. Kannara Kandu is all about seeing Perumal using our eyes. But when we talk of eyes, there are 2 eyes that we have to look at. One is Unakkan, the eyes, physical eyes with which the retina that which we are having Darsanam of Perumal. The other is the Jnanakkan, the actual anubhavams that Alvars, Acharyas and various scriptures helps us to understand Perumal. So there's both Unakkan and Jnanakkan that we are talking about. So when we are talking of Kannara Kandu, it is not just with the plain eyes, but also with the knowledge that and the learnings that our Alvars and Acharyas have blessed us with is what we are going to enjoy. And that is how we need to enjoy Perumal anyway. So Darsanam, the Sri Vaishnava Sampradayam is called Visisht Advaitam. If you go a bit step backwards, the Veda Margam has been eulogized by many acharyas and different schools have been formed, out of which the top 3 schools, as we all know, is Dvaitam, Advaitam, Visisht Advaitam. So what we are enjoying here as Ramanuja Satsishyas are, or what is told as the Visisht Advaitam. The Visisht Advaitam or Dvaitam or Advaitam, whatever we call, is a path. That path, what we call is as Darsanam. The vision or the path, the direction in which you are going is also called in Sanskritam as Darsanam. The vision, Kannara Kandu, is called Darisanam. So let's remember, we are talking about Darsanam and Darisanam in this episode. So the Alvars and Acharyas help us with a lot of Jnana Darsanam, while Perumal in his Archarubam gives us the Unakkan Darisanam. So in the way, through the Alvar Pasarams, we get the Darsanam's Darsanam and Perumal's Darsanams through the Archarubam. So we are going to enjoy one particular incident in Ramanuja's Chatcharitaram, where while Ramanuja established many temples, out of which Srirangam temple in terms of its agamas and rules, what Bhagavad Ramanuja established 1000 years before is still being practiced. So we owe everything to Sri Ramanuja, specifically about Srirangam's, the way things are handled, in which when Sri Ramanuja was, as we discussed again in the last thing, Sri Vaishnava's religious capital is Srirangam. So obviously Bhagavad Ramanuja is going to be stationed there as much as he is going to be there. So when he was establishing the Sampradayam and various things, he was establishing his matam and he was having hordes of Sishyas, obviously, and he used to perform his duties in Srirangam and Kaingaryam the Kovil. One such day, when Ramanuja was doing Tiruvidi Ula around the Chitravidhi and Uttaravidi of Srirangam, and Ramanuja goes on Ula, it's not just 1 person, 2 person going. Probably a whole city is moving because every Sishya will be walking behind Ramanuja. So Ramanujacharya, when he is walking around, he is seeing a very unique situation. He sees a wealthy man, a good looking, nice, princely man kind of looks, and the kind of jewels that he is adorning himself, walking backwards. That is a strange sight. He is walking backwards and he's also holding an umbrella, walking backwards. When Ramanuja gets this sight clearly, he is seeing that there is a lady who is walking towards him, and this gentleman is holding the umbrella just to ensure that the sun's rays doesn't affect this lady. So that is how he's protecting. So you visualize this thing, a lady is walking in front, the man is walking, seeing her walking backwards, holding an umbrella, and the next part is the best part. His love for that lady seems to be so much that he carries a piece of cloth below her leg. So every step she takes is on the piece of cloth so that her legs doesn't get hurt on walking on the streets. Ramanuja finds this very strange. Srirangathla ippudi ottara appdinu solittu, then he just keeps quiet. He could have given enough lectures or what upanyasams or upadesams to this man, saying what you are doing when Ranganatha is here is all for the mortal body and all that. He didn't do anything. He just goes to the ashram, then sends his men to call the gentleman and his wife. He presumed his wife. So he calls both of them. He understands who are you and all that. Then this gentleman says, my name is Dhanur Dasa, and he's the wrestler. He comes from the Mallar community. He's known for his valor using wrestling, and also is a very wealthy person. So he's doing a lot of dana dharma and all that. So much respected. Then he said, why? I found it very strange that in one day, in any day, a person will walk like this, the way you walk. More importantly, in Srirangam, it is a temple town where everybody comes towards the temple, but I see you doing something else. So Dhanur Dasa says, yeah, that's all fine. The lady whom I was taking care is Ponnachiyar, is my wife. She is here. Look at her eyes. I can't get a better eyes anywhere, and I don't want this to be spoiled by the Surya Kiranas, so I'm holding the umbrella, and I don't want to lose sight of it, so I keep looking at her all the time. So that's why I walk backwards, holding the umbrella to ensure that her eyes are protected, and I'm also enjoying the beauty of her eyes. Yes, Ponnachiyar was beautiful, beauty personified. All that is fine. She has beautiful eyes and all that. But still, Ramanuja thinks this is not done because all her body is mortal. Someday it will go anityam. Instead of again Upadesam or Upanyasam, Ramanuja says, okay, can I show you a better pair of eyes than this? Dhanur Dasa is taken aback. He says, is there a better pair of eyes than my wife's Ponnachiyar? It's impossible, he says. Then Ramanuja says, come tomorrow at this time and I will take you. Then next day, Dhanur Dasa comes there along with Ponnachiyar. They go and Ramanuja takes him directly to Periya Perumal in Srirangam and says, Ranga, I'm here with Dhanur Dasa and Ponnachiyar, a lovely couple. Now show them the eyes that you showed Thirupaan Aazhwar. Exactly the same eyes you showed to Thirupaan Aazhwar, you show it to them also. So Ramanuja says, Perumal obeys. So Ranganatha immediately opens his eyes and grants the vision with such obviously lovely eyes of Perumal. There's no question about it. So moment Dhanur Dasa and Ponnachiyar gets the divine blessings and darshan of the eyes of Perumal, Ranganatha, they immediately fall at Ramanuja's feet and says, accept us as disciples. From today, we are going to be in eternal service of you. And then they change their names. Actually, Ponnachiyar, I think, remains the same name. Dhanur Dasa changes his name as Pillai Urangavalli Dasar. So in Ramanuja's Chat Charitram, Pillai Urangavalli Dasa plays a very important role. Now here comes a very interesting thing. Why Urangavalli Dasa is very important. Ramanuja is the incarnation of Adisesha, who had earlier incarnated as Lakshmana. So we know how Lakshmana performed Kainkaryam to Sri Rama, particularly on the 14 years of Anyadavasam. Without a sleep, without anything for himself, Lakshmana provided ultimate service. If you have to really look at Kainkarya Shri, Lakshmana epitomizes whatever Kainkaryam that anybody can perform. So without sleep. So since Lakshmana performed his Kainkaryam to Rama without sleep, Pillai Urangavalli Dasar decided to perform the same service to Ramanuja, because Ramanuja is none other than Lakshmana. So the name came as in Pillai Urangavalli Dasar. He never slept in the service of Sri Ramanuja. So that is how the vision that he thought was the best was changed by Kannara Kandu Ranganathanuda vision, which is changed to Pillai Urangavalli Dasa. Pillai Urangavalli Dasa is not just known for this kind of service. He is both Pillai Urangavalli Dasa and Ponnachiyar are knowledge personified in Sampradayam, in Vedic rituals, and Aazhwar works and all those things. So once Ramanuja was giving Upanyasam about Vibhishna Saranagati, then they say how Vibhishna came with his 4 people and surrendered to Sri Rama. Rama didn't grant it immediately. He went in a debate with Hanuman, Sugriva, and everybody around, Lakshmana also. And then they discussed for some time before granting Saranagati to Vibhishana. So Pillai Urangavalli Dasa was aghast. If Vibhishana himself, who asked directly to Sri Rama, takes so much time to get Saranagati, what will a mortal like me get? Will I ever get Saranagati? Will I ever get refuge under Perumal at all? For which Ramanuja smilingly says, if I am getting Saranagati and Moksham, you will also get. If Periya Nambigal get Moksham and Saranagati, I as Ramanuja will also get. If Sri Alavandar gets Moksham and Saranagati, Periya Nambigal will also get. If Swami Nammadwar gets Moksham through his Saranagati, Sri Alavandar will also get. Why are all these people getting? Because we are all recommended by Periya Pirati to Perumal. So in this lineage, just trust the lineage. That's why we always start all our day with our Guru Parambara Dhyanam and Guru Parambara Prabhavam, because the lineage of Sri Vaishnava Parambara is extremely important, which Ramanuja establishes to Pillai Urangavalli Dasar. So that is how they say. Then Pillai Urangavalli Dasar is happy. Okay, as long as Ramanuja gets it, and I am Ramanuja's Tiruvadi, I'm very happy to get this. He was also referred as Mahamati. His knowledge and Kaingariam and the anubhavams of Perumal and Alvar works were amazing. So he was also respected as Mahamati. So every time Koorathaazhwaan, we'll talk about Koorathaazhwaan, it's not Alvar, Koorathaazhwaan later also. So every time Koorathaazhwaan is the one of the two important subsidiaries of Ramanujacharya. If you go to any Ramanujar Sannadhi, if you go to Perumal Sannadhi, outside you will find two idols with one finger showing, which is Jaya Vijaya. If you go to Ramanujar Sannadhi, you will find two people standing. One will be Koorathaazhwaan, the other will be Mudaliyandan. The identify Koorathaazhwaan will have a long beard like a Chinese beard. So that's an easy way to identify. So Koorathaazhwaan and Mudaliyandan were completely dedicated to Ramanuja in his service. Koorathaazhwaan's Charitram is something amazing. We will look at it later. And when every time Koorathaazhwaan recites Thiruvaimozhi, Swami Nammalvar's Thiruvaimozhi, he says Pillai Urangavalli Dasar in tears. And Koorathaazhwaan is amazed. Here we are going into deeper meanings to get the anubhavam and melt ourselves. But you are so blessed, Dasa, that you are able to melt immediately even on hearing the recitation. Koorathaazhwaan himself was such a knowledgeable person, he melts so much. If he has to say, Pillai Urangavalli Dasar is great, then you can imagine the bhakti of Pillai Urangavalli Dasar, that in terms of his bhakti and knowledge about it. That's why it's called Mahamati. His two nephews, Wonder and Chonder, there were two nephews who were also performing Kaingaryam in and around Srirangam. When the Bhakti movement was obviously challenged by various forces, various people in various times. So one such king wants to play a prank to these Sri Vaishnavas. Here, without offense, probably to the general audience to understand Sri Vaishnavism is one of the things we perform is total surrender to Sriman Narayana. So we only worship Alvar Acharya, which generally the Bhagavatas, and Perumal and Thayar around that only. So we normally respect other Devatas and gods, but we don't worship within quotes. So Sri Vaishnavas typically worship Perumal and Thayar all the time with a dedicated, steadfast focus. So these Wonder Chundar were also such Sri Vaishnavas. The king plays a prank. He shows a Jain temple, and which looks structure-wise, it looks like a temple, and says your Perumal is inside, just where you are walking away without worshipping. So the Wonder and Chundar just fall in the street and worship and then walk away. Then the king mocks at him saying, you know what I did? I made you worship a Jain temple. So then they feel very aghast and they swoon. I mean, such were the dedication that they thought worshipping anybody other than Perumal Thayar, they couldn't stand and they just swoon they just swoon. Dasar hears this and comes running, and he immediately uses the dust from his feet and just sprinkles on them, they wake up. Again, the relations to Tondar Adipodi Alvar's Tirunakshatram today, this Adipodi of a genuine devotee can cure anything. So that is the doubt, because the lineage of Sri Vaishnavism starts from Perumal Thayar and goes to everybody who is following this lineage strictly. So any Tondar Adipodi can be of a medicine of any cure of any kind. So Wonder Chundar is able to come back to their senses and they walk away. So it such happens, Dasar gives a lot of works and all that. And at some stage, his Andima Kalam, his last moments are coming. So he's all set to reach Paramapadam. So he calls Ponnachiyar and says, prepare everything. It's time must come for me to go. You will be surprised at Ponnachiyar's reaction. She's so happy because she knows what is waiting in Paramapadam. So she feeds everybody around her, because when Dasar is ready to go, obviously his disciples, everybody will be there, other Sri Vaishnavas will be there. She will decide to give a feast to all of them, decorates a house, everything for the Jivatma to go reach the Tiruvadi of Paramatma in Paramapadam. So everything is happening, his mortal remains is taken. At the end of the street, the Ponnachiyar is just smilingly seeing him off. At the end of the street, when the body disappears, she feels aghast and collapses there and she dies. And immediately the other disciples, Sri Vaishnavas there, perform the last rites for her also. So that is how the Pillai Urangavalli Dasar, or Dhanur Dasa, was changed his name as Pillai Urangavalli Dasa in his service to Bhagavat Ramanuja. From starting to worshipping the eyes of his wife to become actual devotee of the real eyes of Ranganatha, exactly goes and follows. So Kannara Kandu, he reaches Perumal himself. Manavala Mamunigal, in his Iyal Sattu, uses the first pasaram of written by Pillai Urangavalli Dasar, which goes like this: Nandrum Tiruvudayom, Nanilathil Evvuyarkum, Ondrum Kurayillai Odinum, Kundram Eduthan Adisher, Ramanusan Thal Pidittar, Pidittare Patri. Ramanusan Thal Pidittar, Pidittare Patri. Again, Tondar Adi Podi. Because Ramanuja's time, only few the devotees who were blessed to be around the same time as Ramanuja had direct access to Ramanuja Trivadi. People like us who are there 1,000 years later, obviously we have to go Tondar Adipodi in that lineage. So whoever catches that will reach the abode of Perumal is what Pillai Urangavalli Dasar has written this pasaram, and Manavala Mamunigal has used this as the first pasaram in Iyal Sattu. So this is the first episode of Kannara Kandu that we are enjoying for this day. The second episode is very interesting. When Ramanuja takes Pillai Urangavalli Dasar and Ponnachar to Ranganatha, what does Ramanuja say? Bhagavad Ramanuja says, "Hey Ranganatha, here is Pillai Urangavalli Das, Nadu Dasa and Ponnachar. Show the way you showed the eyes to Thirupaan Aazhwar." So that means there is another precedence where Ranganatha has shown his eyes to Thirupaan Aazhwar earlier the same way. Now, who is Thirupaan Aazhwar? This Thirupaan Aazhwar is one among the 12 Aazhwars. In fact, in terms of avatar lineage, last but one. After Thirupaan Aazhwar, we have Thirumangai Aazhwar. So, just last but one. Thirupaan Aazhwar's Thiruvavataram is Kartigai Rogini. In Kartigai Rogini, which is next day, actually Kartigai is Thirumangai Aazhwar, Kartigai Rogini is Thirupaan Aazhwar. So, it will always be celebrated next day. Thirupaan Aazhwar was the Avatara Sthalam is in this place, Urayur, which is near Srirangam, on the banks of Kaveri. The Panar Kulam, as they are known, they are known for singing praises, music. The Pan is one of the languages, or the way music is written is called Pan. So people who panned a lot of things are called Panar. We saw that in Tirukkurungudi, Nambaduvan was also from Panar Kulam when we discussed about Kaisike Ekadasi. Similarly, Thirupaan Aazhwar was also from the same Panar Kulam. So as a Kulam, they were happily creating songs, setting it up to tunes and singing in praise of Perumal, predominantly Ranganatha, because they are from Urayur. At least the Thirupaan Aazhwar's people around there, because they're the other side of Srirangam. They can see the Kovil, Kaveri is in between, they have to cross Kaveri to go to Srirangam. So this Thirupaan Aazhwar is one such person who was known actually for his bhakti. All the 12 Aazhwars are one form or there an amsam of Perumal's various weapons or various parts of Perumal and all that. Similarly, Thirupaan Aazhwar is the amsam of Srivatsam. Srivatsam, as a Vatsam, it's a heart or Thirumarbu. You'll always find a kind of Thiruvabaranam in the Vatsam of Perumal or Marbu, Thirumarbu. That is called Srivatsam. So Thirupaan Aazhwar is the avataram of manifestation of Srivatsam. So he used to, because of this divineness, he used to sing praises, exhibit knowledge and bhakti in much younger ages. So in fact, people around in Urayur used to worship him as Panar Perumal in terms of exciting, in terms of reverence and all that, before he even gave the Amalanadiparam, which we'll talk about. So this Thirupaan Aazhwar was enjoying the bliss of singing about Perumal and everything, but only with one catch, that he never went into Srirangam. He was only on this side of the Kaveri, and looking from Urayur, he used to look at the Kovil, sing and go back home. He never crossed the Kaveri. So every such day he used to do this. He used to see various Vedic Pandits who will come, particularly the Kaingeparars in Kovil, come there and fetch water from Kaveri for the divine Kaingaryam of Perumal. He used to see them, and then he used to be in one corner, they will come in one corner. I understand from my reading that Kaveri had a particular area marked where that particular area where the Jalam was only kept for Perumal Kaingaryam. So only the Archakas who were performing Kaingaryam used to come and fetch water. Nobody else were allowed there and all that. So everybody will come closer to that, but they will not cross that boundary, obviously, because they said the water is for Perumal Kaingaryam. So even today you can see that the water is fetched from Kaveri, and it will be brought in elephant to Srirangam temple. It's again an amazing sight to see every day how from Tirukaveri you will get. And when we perform Thiruvarandana Kramam at homes, when we do for Saligrama Murti, the place where we hold water is always mentioned as Tirukaveri. So any Kaingiram we perform with Jalam, it's always Tirukaveri for us, irrespective of where it is. But that's how, because Ranganatha used Kaveri, everybody else is also is called Kaveri. So Thirupaan Aazhwar used to stand in the edge of that banks and keep singing praises every day, one song and all those things. One such day, he kind of breaches that boundary and stands there and sings in his immersion of love and devotion. He closes his eyes and he's keeping singing, and he is not visualizing or even realizing that there are people around him waiting to fetch water for Perumal. And Loka Sarangamuni, one of the chief archakas of the Koil, was there waiting to fetch water. He tries to take his attention, but Thirupaan Aazhwar was so immersed in the bhakti, he didn't even realize that somebody is trying to call him. So Loka Sarangamuni tries to make some noises, clap hands, this kind of things, calls him by name and all that. It's not there. So he takes a small stone and wants to splash it on the water with bit force, because the splash of the water he can get distracted. But by direction mistake, like somebody like me throwing, it hits Thirupaan Aazhwar in the forehead. It's a small stone, but it still hits the head on the forehead of Aazhwar. And Aazhwar opens his eyes and realizes that he is standing in the place where the water is supposed to be fetched for Perumal, runs away. So realizing his mistake, and he thinks he's performed an apacharam and walks away, runs away actually. Lokasaranga Muni takes water from that place and goes into Srirangam. To his surprise and amazement, he sees the doors locked strongly and refuses to open. He tries to knock, he tries anything, the doors are just not opening. He gives up and goes home, and worried that he's not able to perform Kengiram to Ranganatha, he closes his eyes. Ranganatha comes in his dream and says, "You hurt my bhakta. You know what did you do? The stone you threw hit the forehead of my bhakta, and he's bleeding. And now you see my forehead is also bleeding." So you can, Ranganatha's love for Thirupaan Aazhwar so much that the bleeding happens in Thirupaan Aazhwar, he is able to show in his forehead also. Really terrified by this act, Lokasaranga Muni immediately performs there itself a surrender to Ranganatha and says, "Apologize, Shamikanam, just pardon me, what should I do?" He says, "Get my bhakta into the Kovil. That's the only thing you can do. Only then the doors will open." So Lokasaranga Muni next morning goes all the way to Urayur and then finds out Thirupaan Aazhwar and so profusely apologizes and begs his pardon for the mistake he did and says, "Come to Srirangam." Thirupaan Aazhwar says, "No, I'm not coming to Srirangam. We are Panar Kulam. I don't think we are allowed in there. So we will stay here only." Lokasaranga Muni tries to tell him so much. He says, "Perumal ordered you to be there and all that." Thirupaan Aazhwar says, "My feet cannot touch there." Then Lokasaranga Muni says, "Okay, your feet should not touch." Is that why? No problem. Come over. I will carry you. So we have seen Garuda Vahanam, we have seen Yana Vahanam, we have seen Simha Vahanam. Here, Alvar goes in the Munivar, so he's called Munivahana. So Lokasaranga Muni holds Thirupaan Aazhwar in his shoulders, holding his feet, and travels all the way from Urayur to Srirangam fully, and then makes him stand in front of Ranganatha. Now, you can imagine Thirupaan Aazhwar's feeling at that time. The Ranganatha that is once praying from few miles away, just the temple, one is singing praises, one is longing to see. Now is directly standing in front of him. And that is the kind of love that he gets. And the bhakti, he immediately bursts into 10 different pasarams, which is called Amalan Adipiran. The pasarams start as Amalan Adipiran Adiyarku Atpadithameyin. So that's how it starts. That's why the 10 pasarams are called Amalan Adipiran. So what does Aazhwar do? Thirupaan Aazhwar, Kannara Kandu. He is now enjoying Perumal with his eyes fully for the first time. And Ranganatha, we all know, in the reclining posture. So Padadi Keshamap, he starts singing praise of Perumal in his Amalanadipiran. So in the first pasaram, he starts with Thiru Kamala Padam Vandin Kandinullana Okkindrade. So obviously, moment we see Perumal, we only go towards Tiruvadi. So Aazhwar is obviously, as Aazhwar worships the Tiruvadi first, and in this first pasaram starts with Amalanadipiran and says, "Thiru Kamala Padam Vandin Kandinullana Okkindrade." Then the next pasaram, obviously from Tiruvadi, he moves up, he sees his thighs and all that. Obviously, it's covered with Veshti. So, Arachevenda Adain Male, Sendradam in Sindaniye. That's how he finishes the second pasaram. Then the third pasaram is very interesting. Mandibai Vadavengada Mamalai is how it starts. Vanavargal Sandhi Sayyan Indran and Salte, he'll say Edil Undi. So he enjoys the navel of Perumal. Why navel of Perumal gets special mentioned because that is where from his Nabi Kamalam is where Brahma comes. So the whole evolution starts from Perumal's Nabi Kamalam. So that gets a special mention here. But here Purvacharyas in his third Pasaram, Mandipai Vadavengada Mamalai, they say, why he uses Mandipai Vadavengada Mamalai. This is the only Pasaram where while he's talking of Ranganatha, he's also bringing in Tirupati Perumal. Mandipai Vadavengada Mamalai, he says. And when we go to Tirupati, we all see a lot of monkeys around, walking around. Now, the Purvacharya's explanation here is amazing. The mandis here, Aazhwar or Purvacharya is not referring to the monkeys, they are referring to all of us because every time we go to Tirupati, we go with one new request. So, like a monkey jumping from one tree to another, one fruit to another, we don't go to worship him or to see him. Kannara Kandu pola. First time I go, Nana Padikno, we go. Then Nana Vela Kadakno, we go. Then Naraya Sambadikno, promotion, foreign tour, when we go. Then Nalla Kalyan Agno, Kwandagal Pragno, Kwandagal Padikno, Vidu Asal Vagno. So every time we go, our request to Perumal keeps changing like a mandi. So the reference here as Purvacharyas and Aazhwars are actually hitting us strongly. Mandibai Vadavengada Mamalai is what he said, but that apart, here Thirupaan Aazhwar enjoys the undi, the navel, that's where, because Nabi Kamalam, from where Brahma comes up, from there entire evolution starts. So that's what he does. Then the next Pasaram, he enjoys the Thiru Vaitru Udarabandham. Why Vaitru Udarabandham? And the Vaitla da vandu Yasoda Krishnana Katti Pota. So that is where moment you see Perumal's the stomach area, what comes to our mind is the way Yasoda is able to tie up Sri Krishna with just, or rather, Yasoda doesn't tie up. Krishna allows himself to be tied up by Yasoda with just a rope. And that is what Madurai Aazhwar's Kanninun Siruthambu starts with. Kanninun Siruthambinal Kattunna Panniya Perumayan is what he says. Kattunna Panniya, that is very important too. You can't tie a Perumal here. He has to allow himself to be tied. And how does he tie? Kanninun Siruthambinal. Siruthambu, Nun Siruthambu, Kanninun Siruthambu. That was the small gap that was happening. Finally, he gave in that gap and allowed himself to be tied by Yashoda. Similarly, you look at Andal's Thirupave, Sitranjirugale, Kale, Sirigale, Sitranjirugale. So there is a minute measure that keeps coming in these pasarams. So here also he enjoys the Thiruvait Udarabandham. Then the next pasaram, he talks about his Thirumarbu, Thiruaramarbadandro. He only enjoys the Thirumarbu of Perumal. Moment he says Marbu, he uses Thiru also again, because we also know Pirati is always there in Thirumarbu. That is what Periyalvar also says in his Thirupallandu, Un Valamarbinil Valgindra Mangiyam Pallandu. So moment we see Perumal, we have to always include Tayar, because we say Perumal is Sriman Narayanan, Shriyapati. They are never separated. They have to be together all the ways. And even if we see Perumal standing alone or sitting alone in many kshetrams that we see, we can be sure in his Valamarbu, Tayar is there. So that is why Thirupaan Aazhwar in the next pasaram talks about Thiruaramar Bodandro. Then the sixth pasaram, he talks about his Perumal's neck. Mutrum Undagandam, the entire world he swallows and brings it back from his neck portion only. So again, he worships the Undagandam is what he's talking about. And the next pasaram, the seventh pasaram, Thirupaan Aazhwar enjoys the lips. I mean, there's so many Aazhwar pasarams, Andal's pasarams in particular, enjoying the lips of Perumal, which is supposed to be everything. And why the lips of Perumal is everything? Because that lips gives us, tells us, Masuchaha, don't worry, I will take her. That lips are the ones which gives us the Bhagavad Gita. That leaves us the Ramacharana Slokam. That lips are the ones which gives us the Varahacharana Slokam. So the lips of Perumal is such an important thing that we need to worship. And here, when Aazhwar sees the lips, he uses the word Ayo. So Sayyavai Ayo is what he says. When this Ayo is here, is not just negative, but an enjoyment in which he is talking about Sayyavai Ayo. He goes into total bliss seeing the lips. And here we are talking of Perumal, right? Ranganathan's lips. So that's what it is. But the eighth pasaram, one, thanks to the Sri Vaishnava Satsangam in Singapore, which taught me in the early days, is the one pasaram that I can't take my eyes off, because that pasaram of 8th is actually eulogizing Ranganathan's eyes by Thirupaan Aazhwar. He says, Kariyavagi, Pudai Parandu, Milirndu, Sevvariyodi, நீண்ட அப்பெரியவாய கண்கள் என்னை பேதமை செய்தனவே. 6 adjectives for one component called ice. Kariyavagi, Karuppa, Pudai Parande, Nalla Persa, Milirந்து, bright, and just Milirந்து. We'll also come to Milirந்து. Severiodi, Ninda a Periyavaya Kangal, Enne Pedami Sedanave. This is one pasaram which can just take us in all the time, because there is so much into it that you can see that Ranganatha said. Now, here comes the classic thing. When Bhagavad Ramanuja brings the Dhanurdasa and Ponnachar and says, show the way you showed yourself to Thirupaan Aazhwar, this pasaram is a clear explanation as to prove that Ranganatha showed himself to Thirupaan Aazhwar. How? Because first is Kariyavagi, Pudai Parande. That's okay. Even in a Shila Rupam, we can give black eyes and big Pudai Parande. It's not a problem. But Milirinde, how does one ice glow? The glow happens when there's a little bit of water in it. And when do you get water? When you have excitement, when you are very happy, of course, the sorrow part of it, we will leave it. In extremely joy, when you are excited seeing somebody. Here, Ranganatha is saying Thirupaan Aazhwar, an ardent devotee. So you can see Ranganatha's love flowing in his Milirndu. Then the next one, Sevariodi. In a Shila Rupam, we can't get red lines. Here, the Aazhwar is seeing Sevariodi because he's recorded it. So these two are clear cases, that Milirndu and Sevariodi, that Ranganatha showed himself up to Thirupaan Aazhwar, and the same way on the command of Ramanuja, he shows himself up the same way to Dhanurdasa also. So that is the greatness of Kannara Kandu. இது வந்து கண்ணார கண்டு நம்ம பெருமாள் செய்கிறது மட்டும் இல்ல, ரங்கநாதன் disciple Kannara Kandu. Thirupaan Aazhwar மாதிரி ஒரு disciple, why will he lose him? So Ranganatha is so happy that he is also Kannara Kandu about seeing an Aazhwar. So he's actually showing himself up in Srirangam. And in the 9th Pasaram, again Aazhwar, obviously with such kind of vision and all that, he sees the entire Tirumani, Padadikesam again, and says, Neelameni Ayyo. Second time he uses Ayyo in the Pasaram, again in ecstasy, again in so much happiness and melting, that he uses the word Ayyo again. So Neelameni Ayyo Niregondagan Engineer. So completely you have taken up, is what Aazhwar says in the 9th Pasaram. Now, normally, if you recite Aazhwar Pasarams, they will come in 10s, 20s, in a combination of like that. The last Pasaram, invariably what is called as a Palastuti. If you recite this 10, if you recite this 20, if you recite this 45, you will get this benefit. That's what is called Palastuti. Here, as Thirupaan Aazhwar in his 10th Pasaram, Kondal Vannanai Kovalanai Vannayunda Vayan Yen Ullam Kavarndane Underkon Anirangan Yen Amudunai Kanda Kangal Matrandunai Kanave. He ends it. I don't want Palasthiti. In Amudunai Kanda Kangal, where Edum Pakwandan he immerses into Perumal there. Its Charitram is such that Aazhwar just immerses himself in Ranganatha after this Pasaram. So the Palasthiti is in Amudunai Kanda Kangal Matrandunai Kanave. So when we say Kannara Kandu, when we visit the temple and all that, now link this to the Tirumalai Pasaram that we saw about Thondaradippudi Aazhwar. Kudadisai Mudiyai Vaittu, Gunadisai Padam Neetti, Vadadisai Pinvugatti, Tendisai Ilangi Nokki, Kadal Nirak Kadavalendai Aravanai Tuiluma Kandu, Udalana Kurugumalo, Enseigen, Ulagathire. He asked this question to us, Kandu, Yanakodam Urugurdi, Ningalan Jale Puringlen, our Kekra. So Adeva Iver Solari, Amudinai Kanda Kangal, Matrandrunai Kanave, he just immerses. So that is the Palastuti and greatness of Thirupaan Aazhwar, that Ranganatha shows himself up and Aazhwar bursts into this 10 Pasaram, Amalanathi Piran, where we can actually enjoy this whole Ranganatha by reciting this from Tiruvadi to Tirumudi and enjoy that Milirndu Sevariodi. We can also see him showing his eyes to us and blessing us. So that's the greatness. And Swami Vedanta Desikan actually has written two Pasarams, two set of stotras, Sri Suktis, eulogizing Thirupaan Aazhwar. One is Munivahana Bogan. So about Perumal, as I said, he comes in the Vahana of Tiloka Saranga Muni. So he's called as Munivahanan. So Munivahana Boham is given. And there's another one, I forgot the name. So there's another Pasaram which is equivalent of actually giving the Thirupaan Aazhwar's Pasaram. He gives this Pasaram. It comes as a ladder or something. Sorry, I missed the name. So that is two things, Kannara Kandu. So here we talked about Bhagavad Ramanuja's blessings, in which Ponnachar and Pillai Urangavalli Dasar were blessed with the vision, the same vision that Perumal blessed Thirupaan Aazhwar with. So speaking of Darisanam and Darsanam, it goes hand in hand. It is not just about seeing by this eyes, but also to the Jnanam and the knowledge that Aazhwars and Acharyas feed us, and we can have the divine darshan. Speaking of this, as mentioned about Koorathaazhwaan, we will have a brief introduction to Koorathaazhwaan today and then talk about it in the next session because that's part of the title of the next session also, next month session. Koorathaazhwaan is not Alvar, as I said, is Alvan. He is one of the two successors, important successors of Bhagavad Ramanuja, Koorathaazhwaan and Mudaliyandan, as we say. Koorathaazhwaan is such a wealthy individual. He and his Devier, her name is Andal, they lived in a place called Kuram. Kuram is about half an hour drive from Kanchipuram, today's Kanchipuram. He was so wealthy that when he slams the door in the night, the Mani Sattam will be heard by Perandevi Tayar and Perumal, Varadaja Perumal in Kanchipuram. And so that big door, that big the money they had. Now that at some stage, Tayar asked, is there somebody so wealthy than you? Because Varadarajan and Tayar are supposed to be the wealthy. Because Varadarajan, as we say, we enjoyed this earlier in Swami Desikan's Patsaram. Nasti Pitrarjidam Kinchit, Namaya Kinchitarchitam, Astime Hasti Sailagre, Vastu Paitamaham Danam. You know, Mupatan Setu Sotte, Vardan Daname, Vardana Abdin, Varadarajan Kamikra. So that Varadarajan who grants every wealth, and that Perandevi Tayar who recommends Varadarajan to grant us the wealth, he's saying, is there somebody so wealthy that we can see? Because Koorathaazhwaan was such a wealthy person and a dharmic person who kept giving Dana Dharmam, people food, constructing schools, whatever that has to be done in those days he used to do. So one fine day, in his dream, Perumal and Tayar comes and says, enough of all this, start on your spiritual journey. Koorathaazhwaan drops everything that day and gives up everything else to everybody in the place and goes in search of Ramanuja, falls at this Ramanuja's feet and asks them to take them as their disciples. So the Koorathaazhwaan, when they become substitutes of Ramanuja, they do various sancharans, they start doing various work and all that. At that time, there was a Sora king who was establishing firmly the Shaiva Siddhantam. So he was going behind everybody who are non-Shaivites and converting them to Shaivism. And there was one minister in his court called Naluran who said, you keep doing all these things, it doesn't help. You just go get Ramanuja and then ask them to say Shiva is the best, everybody will follow blindly. So you just get this done. So it's what Naluran says. So the king sends the two or three people, his warriors, to get Ramanuja. At that time, Ramanuja was taking bath in one of the rivers. Koorathaazhwaan was waiting on the banks as part of the service. He realizes why these people have come. He quickly changes the cloth of Ramanuja. Ramanuja, you know, is a sannyasi, he wears saffron, while Koorathaazhwaan with this Devier is there, so he'll always wear white. So Koorathaazhwaan swaps the sannyasi uday, the saffron kashayam, to himself, leaves the white to Ramanuja and walks to the soldiers saying, I am Ramanuja, and goes to the king's court. Even today, there is one day's Utsavam where Ramanuja is Vellasathu Utsavam, as they call it. Ramanuja will adorn himself as Vellaveshti for one day to depict this Puranic Charitram incident. So in the court's, king's court, this king says, okay, Ramanuja, come there, I'm establishing Shaivism. You know, I'm a Tivra Shaiva Bhakt. They're going to debate with, obviously, the learned knowledge pandits everywhere. So Koorathaazhwaan establishes why Perumal is ultimate, while the Shiva pandits establish why Shiva is ultimate. The debate goes on, king doesn't give up. Finally, king says whether he'll accept or not. So Shivam is the best or ultimate, will you please accept, is what the kind of command that the king gives. Koorathaazhwaan uses Sanskrit language, his Pandityam in it, to twist it, saying that Shivam is a measure. He says there is something more than that, which is, what do you call this, Dronam is better than that or something. Enraged by this, king asks his eyes to be gouged out. Koorathaazhwaan says, I will gouge out the eyes myself for seeing such a criminal guy and all that. So Koorathaazhwaan plucks his own eyes in the king's court. So for the Sri Vaishnava Darsanam, Koorathaazhwaan gave his Darsanam himself itself. So the Darsanam and Darsanam, the Sri Visishtadvaitam, is given and protected by Acharyas and Alvars in such length and such seriousness, because they believe that what the Vedas says, what the Alvar Pasaram says, and the manifestation of Perimal, everything, they gave it. So Kannara Kandu, Perumal Sevikara Bhagyam, in the Perumal Sevikku Kudadunu சொன்னதுக்காக அந்த கண்ணை எடுத்துட்டார் Koorathaazhwaan. So that is what we are talking about. So in the overall, today we enjoyed, as the title says, Kannara Kandu. To enjoy Perumal, we have to have Jnanakkan and Unakkan. Unakkan to see the figures in which, because Perumal blesses himself with that Archa Rupam. Otherwise, we won't know how Rama looks, we won't know how Narsimha looks. So he blesses us with the Archa Rupam. But to understand why Perumal is like that in Thiruvallikeni, why is Ranganatha like this, what is the Puranam behind Thiruvenkamudan, we have to understand Alvar's works and Acharya's works. That is where Jnanakan comes in. And it's not going to a temple and coming again and saying, to understand all these things, to experience this, we go to a Kovil, I worship and come. So let's, by the divine blessings of Alvar Acharya, let's worship Sri Ranganatha at all times. Kannara Kandu, Namo Narayana.
Thanks, Anand. It was enjoyable.
Thank you very much.